Hello, and welcome back to the Halfie Project podcast. My name is Becky, sitting here on the podcasting couch, and right next to me is Cedric Sky City, and we are having a wonderful, great day, and the weather is so nice outside, and because it's summer.
It's super hot though.
Summer love is happening.
Super duper hot.
Let's see. Maybe we should catch people up on what's been happening.
Yeah. Actually, no, this past week was pretty exciting because you performed. You sang a song. You sang two songs that we actually wrote together.
Did we?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we wrote two songs. One was like an R&B balladish kind of song, and then the other song was a pop EDM. I don't know what you would call it. And you had to perform for a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And yeah, we wrote the song for that. So that was pretty exciting because that was actually the first time we ever did anything musically.
I can't believe that was this week.
Yeah.
I feel like that was like last year. Time went by so quickly, didn't it? I can't keep track of anything now. But yeah, we'll finish up those songs, and we can let you guys know when that comes out.
Definitely.
On the other YouTube channels. So yeah, but that's unrelated to what we're talking about today.
Right.
We're going to talk about 6 things I hate about being mixed.
Ooh.
And it's such a clickbait title, and I want to apologize in advance for that. But basically, how we came up with this is, so I'm part of a couple of Facebook. Did you say you're part of those groups as well? Like some of those Facebook groups?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Probably not all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, a handful of them.
So
I'm not active though.
There's a couple of Facebook groups, and actually a lot of you guys who are listening might be a part of them. I'm not going to give away the titles of the groups, but basically they're for like Asian groups, mixed Asian groups, mixed groups, and people can join these private groups, and they share like memes, and they share their own stories or photos, and it's kind of a community for if you fit in that category of like the mixed Asians or just mixed people, a place for you to share like your own thoughts or things that happen in your life, your experiences, and people can respond. Of course, it's supposed to be like that, a community page, right? And I love that we have that. And I think that's so great that this platform exists.
Yeah.
Good to have a way to talk with people, even if they're not immediately in your physical vicinity, but even somewhere across the world. You guys might be sharing experiences and being able to relate with each other. And that's such a beautiful thing to see. Now, as I was trolling.
Trolling? You're trolling those groups?
This is my regular Tuesday afternoon. As I was trawling through these groups, and I read the comments and I read the posts, because I kind of like to see what's, I guess the term is like the social temperature of the generations and what they're saying about being mixed and how people feel about that. And some people, like some crowds will be like, oh yeah, being mixed, or some people will say this about being mixed, and sometimes I sympathize and sometimes I don't. And I decided to pull out some of, maybe at this point 6, of the very common statements that I'm seeing on these groups. And I thought we could kind of put into more, I guess, just have a basic discussion about what those statements mean and why people feel certain ways about that. Now, it sounds pretty vague when I'm just saying it like this, but when I read the statements out loud, people will get it. So, and maybe it was you who wrote this on the Facebook page yourself, and maybe you're really going to strongly relate. That's kind of the hope. But so when it comes to things about being mixed, or when it comes to issues of race and culture, sometimes I feel definitions or descriptions or how you feel can be very hard to put into words, which, in my opinion, can cause more hurt or damage if you feel something very strongly and you can't express it to somebody who doesn't understand or feel the same way.
Right.
And then it can create recurring cycles and cycles and cycles. Like, why are you upset about that? Why does that bother you? Because you don't have the words to explain it, right? We see this all the time when you're having arguments with people, right? And you can't get your words right out.
Yeah, that's totally me. and you know that so
I'm not
well.
looking at you. Yeah, and so I think it's good to have discussions about this. The more you talk about it, the more words that you'll have, and the better you'll be able to educate other people.
Right.
That's the whole purpose. So, so these are 6 things I hate about being mixed, which I pulled from various Facebook groups. So the first one, this is something I see very commonly, people making this statement. No one seems to know where I'm from. They always ask me, where are you from? No, where are you really from?
Right.
Right.
That's usually one of the biggest things that not only mixed people, but also like non-majority people. In other words,
Yeah.
like ethnic looking people in places like the United States and other places where they are the minority. That's usually the thing that they bring up. For mixed people as well, because mixed people tend to be very ambiguous in how they look, depending on the mix, or I mean, it's just depending on obviously genetics, but a lot of times, like for me, when I was growing up, I got everything under the sun. People thought I was Hawaiian. People thought I was Filipino. People thought I had a couple of people actually think I was like from India.
Or Native American.
Native American. And yeah, there are a couple of people who can guess that I'm like half black or mixed. And some people think that I have some Asian in me, but they can't really pinpoint it. So it's like, the question is always phrased like, where are you from, versus like, oh, what is your ethnic background, or something like that, which is funny because when you ask the question, where are you from, you're kind of implying that you're not from the place where
That's
you
right.
are, or where you
Right.
grew up, or where you're born.
Right.
Yeah. So, which is kind of weird.
Right. And I think you hit the head on the nail there, because what that question innately does, maybe on a subconscious level, is making a separation between you and me, and us and you.
Yeah.
Right? Well, where are you from? We're all from here. Obvious. Look at us. See our skin tones. We're from here.
Right.
But you're an alien. And whether they mean that in their actual question, whether they're implying that to say like you're not belonging here, the problem is when you hear this many, many times, I think it can get absorbed inside of you, and you start to feel like, okay, why do I have to prove that I'm from here? Why do I have to prove every single time I meet somebody new that I also belong?
Yeah. And you also made mention, like, if you hear it enough, and you know, you can internalize it as frustration, it becomes very annoying when you're used to growing up hearing it, and it just never stops. It never ends. Like, I mean, just growing up as a teenager hearing it, I mean, one time is okay.
Right.
You can understand that. 2 times, okay. Yeah, sure. But like hundreds of times,
And
which has been the case for
literally.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally hundreds, more than that, through the span of your lifetime.
Yeah.
And it can be multiple times a day, depending on where you are.
Right. And it's funny because escaping the U.S., I shouldn't put it like that, but coming to yeah, that's what it feels like now.
The
But
house that's on fire.
yeah,
At the moment.
coming to Korea, living here for the past 2 years, we get the same exact questions, usually mostly from cab drivers.
Yes.
Yeah, like they always ask, which country are you from?
Yes. Or
Yeah.
today when I was at the gym, and you have like the changing room, something that happens to me very commonly when I go to saunas, gymjebang, or gyms, whenever I'm changing, all the older women in the room will watch me, which is kind of weird, but they will always make comments like, "Oh, you're so tall. Where are you from? Are you Korean?" Like,
Yeah.
and they always stare at me, and I'm just like, this is not a great question, especially not at the moment where I'm like trying to get dressed. I've gotten used to it at this point, and usually I'm just like, oh, let's talk, ladies. But yeah, that happens a lot in the gym room.
Isn't it so funny that whenever people ask you that, most of the time it's in
It's in good faith.
Yeah, good faith. But they're always so excited to ask it, like they're the first person to ever ask
Yeah,
that, or they just made it a discovery.
I bet no one's ever told you this before. But
And it's just like, oh my gosh, it gets old.
So this is the thing. So if you are a mixed person and you're listening to this statement, you're like, yes, that's how I feel. Oh my gosh, it's so annoying. Then please listen to what we're saying and how we put it into words. And this is the one request that I have, and something I've been teaching myself. Take those questions as an opportunity for education.
Right.
Rather than snapping back and be like, I'm from here. The thing is, that doesn't solve anything. And in fact, it just reinforces this mindset of like, don't ask, don't bother.
Yeah, and I can be guilty of that in
Sure,
the
'cause it's
way
annoying.
that I respond.
Yeah.
Like I could be a little bit more short. Or I don't think I've ever been rude, but I've wanted to be rude. I've wanted to respond rudely. But that's because, again, like it's all those years of going through the same thing and feeling like, oh, you're asking a question that makes me feel different.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. I think the fact that I think the main reason why people ask those questions is out of ignorance. And I don't mean ignorance in a necessarily in a bad way, like, oh, you're stupid. It's just you don't know, or you haven't had the opportunity to learn or to be educated in that way, you know? So I think taking the opportunity to just have a conversation, even a short one, would be great.
I think that would really, you're just one person, you know, and you're going to encounter hundreds of people who will ask you the same thing over and over again.
Right.
But that one interaction you have with that one individual asking you this question is yet another opportunity to be like, hey, let me shed some light on something that maybe you didn't know before. And it can feel like a big responsibility on yourself, but I feel like it's a necessary one. Okay, let's go to the next question, or the next one I've seen. This is one I've noticed, especially among our younger single folks on these Facebook groups. People like to exoticize me. People are always fetishizing me. Like, oh, okay, you've got yellow fever. You need to calm down. I will see this, and people like to make jokes about it. People like to make memes, and people like to really just, what's the word? Lambast people who are leaving comments or text messages about like, oh my gosh, I love your skin color, or this kind of thing. And in a way, I understand that you like to share these texts with your friends. Like, oh, look what this crazy white guy said about me. Ugh, he's fetishizing me. Yes, I understand. Sometimes it's need to get it out of you and to feel like, hey, defend me on this half. And so you talk to your friends about it. But on the same side, simply making fun of somebody behind their back because of how they exoticize or fetishize you, again, doesn't really fix anything. Something I'd like to point out is that people get fetishized or exoticized, yes, because sometimes, one, the person is just straight up weird. That's one thing. We can't lie about that. And the other one is because they've just never seen anything like you before.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know how to respond when you've seen something that's like, whoa, that's so amazing or beautiful or rare. And not at times your response isn't always, you know, the best ever. But at the same time, I kind of understand that, right? I don't know where exactly I'm going with this. Because I don't want to defend.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it doesn't sound like you're defending. I think you're trying to be empathetic in a way. But I don't know, because I don't have too much personal experience with being fetishized.
Why, all those women who are just like, who are you?
No. I mean, the closest thing that I can remember is just kind of growing up and, you know, people finding out that I'm mixed and girls are like, oh, that's really cool. You're very handsome, blah, blah, blah. But I never got any creepy vibes.
I feel like women get that a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Mixed women get it all the time.
Right.
Yeah, like you can even see sometimes, I don't remember who it was, but there was apparently like this rap video call sheet that had been released publicly. And it was saying like the 4 types of women that they want in the shoot. And they said the hottest ones, we want mixed girls. And then the second one was, oh, we want white girls. And the third one was like, oh, we want this type, and fourth one, we want this type. But the thing is, you can see that they equated hot girls with mixed girls.
Yeah.
And this is something that's very common, I notice. And I understand, especially as a woman, like nobody likes to have those lecherous eyes on you. So how are you supposed to respond to something like that?
I don't know. Like, I would imagine, because I hear stories of girls putting guys in their place, or at least wanting to, whenever I hear them talk about that. But is that the best thing to do, or should you just ignore those guys, or what? I mean, it's kind of weird if like the girl takes the time to like just try to educate this strange dude that's hitting on her because she's being fetishized.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what the solution is to that.
I do think you need to draw a line, and I also do think this is part of a bigger problem. Because we can try to pinpoint and be like, oh, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this to a girl. You shouldn't do this to a girl. The fact remains that, in my opinion, I think it's part of a large education that needs to happen to males in society overall, how to respect a woman. And we definitely see that we have these issues with sexual discrimination, right? Harassment. This is totally rampant everywhere. And there's no way you can, I believe, solve this issue just by saying like, hey, you shouldn't fetishize me. You have every right to say that. And I believe you should. But I do think that this is something as a greater whole we'll have to deal with.
Yeah.
But the point of that is saying we hear you and we also acknowledge that something should be done. So I think we can be part of that bigger conversation. Okay, the next one. I don't fit in with either side.
Man, this is probably the one I deal with the most emotionally. Now and even growing up. I don't feel like I personally fit in on either side completely, but a lot of that is me and just my mentality and just I don't know if it's insecurity, but or me just feeling like, oh, they don't really accept me, just kind of projecting how I think they view me on them, you know. But it is true that in Korea, at least, since I'm half black, half Korean, I truly don't feel like I fit in here. Because one, I grew up in the States, so that in and of itself is big. Whether you're Korean American or half Korean, it doesn't matter. It's just totally different world. But then two, how I look here and the way that Koreans view the Korean ethnic group, or the Korean, I don't want to say race, probably not the right word, but I guess the Korean people is more homogenous and more, they take pride in their Korean blood, right? And being pure. So I don't feel like I fit in here, but I do feel like with my black side, most of the time, I feel like I could fit in better there.
Yeah.
Because I am embraced more. And, in the States, as African Americans, we're pretty mixed up as it is anyway.
Sure.
And we're a very open culture, generally speaking. So, but I felt it on both sides. Sometimes I feel like if I'm hanging around a bunch of black people, right, whether it's friends or just, I'm in a crowd, sometimes I get that feeling of, man, I wonder if people like think I'm not really black. Just things that I deal with. I'm just being totally honest. But ultimately, I get over that, and I'm just like, I just chill with either side. It's whatever.
Just hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That was a little therapy session there.
No, but
Thank you for
I
listening.
think it's good to point it out and to put it into words why you might feel that way. I think sometimes we get this frustration at ourselves, our identity, and not feeling like we could belong here or belong there. And we actually take it out on ourselves or our parents. I don't think it's you who is the ugly one. I think it's society that is the ugly thing.
Yeah.
The place that makes you feel like you can't be part of it, you can't belong. I think that's the problem, not the fact that you are different. So I think if we have to come to this, sometimes it's a brutal acceptance that I will not 100% be one thing or the other. As much as we like to say like, oh, I'm both, I'm full, I'm 100% everything. But it is true on one hand, but also on the other hand, it's impossible to fully understand a language, a culture, a lifestyle, a country, unless you have been there from birth until I don't know how many years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that totally makes sense. But also on the flip side, it also depends, right? Because if you have, let's just say, two different races that grew up within the same culture, maybe it's a little different.
Yeah.
Or maybe the two cultures in and of itself are multi-ethnic. You know what I mean?
Sure.
For example, just one off the top of my head, like Puerto Ricans aren't just one like ethnicity per se, right? There are different types of mixes, but that is the culture that binds them together. They have a common language, a common culture. And so you can have like maybe Puerto Rican, you're half Puerto Rican and then half, I don't know, something else. And maybe there is no problem blending in because the nature of the culture. But I think
I was thinking more on the scale of like, say, like someone who's half white and half Vietnamese.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there is a spectrum of that, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think, okay, great. So then let me then try to package what I was trying to say. That you don't need to beat yourself up over feeling like you are lacking. Because it is something out of your hands. And I think if we ever attack ourselves or hate ourselves or feel bad about ourselves because of something that's totally out of our hands, in the end, it is only damaging to yourself. And in fact, you have so much more to offer just as who you are, whether or not outside societies and cultures are accepting of that. And it's kind of a big thing to say of yourself. But in a way, it's a beautiful responsibility. So I think in that regard, I don't fit in with either side of my cultures. The most important thing to remember is that, but you are who you are. And it doesn't really matter what the outside world is saying about you. So the next one, I can't speak the language and I feel guilty for it. This is something I came across really a lot in the mixed Facebook group. People would be like, I feel like I can't talk to one of my parents because of this. Oh, every time I visit my family, like I know they're talking about me, but I can't understand what they're saying. I feel so guilty. Why can't I understand? I also went through this immensely when I couldn't speak Korean fluently. I remember just feeling such intense guilt because it's not just, oh, why can't I speak the language? Oh, I'm so stupid, as in like on a language learning side.
Yeah.
It's because you innately feel like I should speak it. Something's
Right.
wrong with me that I don't.
I am half Korean as much as I'm half white and speak English. So why can't I speak Korean?
Right. And you
it's
feel
part
that
of me.
burden on yourself.
Yeah.
Well, that one is kind of, it's totally understandable. I think, though, that something that we need to have in this case is grace for ourselves. Be like, yeah, well, maybe your parents didn't teach you the other language for a certain reason. Maybe because they didn't want people to look down on you. Maybe because at that time, immigration was not something people were proud of, right? Or maybe they're afraid you're going to fall behind in school if you were speaking one different language at home than what you're learning at school.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Especially
of
like
different
the
reasons.
older generations, like
Yeah.
my mom's generation and probably your mom's generation probably dealt with that sort of mindset. And I think that's why like my mom never wanted to teach us or drill that into us in terms of making our house a two language house. It was, but she didn't force us or make us learn Korean. And I think it was, I remember her telling me it was because she probably didn't feel like there was a need. We're growing up in America. Why teach
Yeah.
us Korean? But she
Right.
regrets it. I remember her telling me like 2 years ago that she regrets that.
I think if you come to terms with that and say like, all right, well, that's just how it is. That was not any fault of my own. And then on
Yeah.
the other side is just to recognize that learning a language is not an easy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if it's in your blood. It doesn't matter if you're supposed
Right.
to speak that language or not, by what people say.
Right.
The fact is, language itself is just a hard thing to learn.
It really is.
So you need to have a little grace for yourself.
Right. And there is always hope because languages can be learned.
Yes.
It takes a lot of effort, of course,
Yeah.
but you can always learn
And you
it.
could totally, this idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, I don't believe that. You can be 70-year-old and try to learn a new language.
agree.
It is possible.
I agree.
So it's never too late.
Right.
Okay, I get off my soapbox now. Come back. So here's the other one. People judge my parents. So actually, we had a comment on your YouTube channel where somebody was like, progeny of war brides. Do you remember that comment?
I vaguely.
Essentially
vaguely,
saying like,
yeah.
oh, so one of your parents was raped by an American soldier, and you're the result of that.
Yeah.
Now, people make these kind of horrific judgments all the time. If we look at, sadly, the whole scale of history, you're going to see that a lot of mixed children are the result of war. Certain soldiers, encampments across in other countries. And it's usually out of some kind of, I guess, large scale tragedy that many, not always, but a lot of mixed kids in the past were the result of. People still somehow seem to think that that's just what it happens, that it's not that people fell in love, and chose to be together.
Yeah.
But they think that, oh, it's because you're a war baby or something, which also want to point out, even if you are, like, there's nothing wrong with you.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, what was that? That was loud. Someone's moving upstairs. Yeah. And so when people judge your parents, when people make those kind of statements, depending on the context, I think you have every right to correct them.
Right.
But not in like excuse me, but kind of just, hey, actually, no, they happen to fall in love and, this is da.
Yeah.
And so you have, if you want to share, I believe that you have every right to be open about that.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share my parents' story because.
And I think that was so great.
Yeah, I mean, the way they fell in love, I mean, it's not your stereotypical, soldier stationed in Korea meets the woman, and nothing wrong with that. That's totally great. But that's what people think, and they have a negative kind of like mindset towards that.
Right.
Even Korean people here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter. The point is you're here and your life is valuable,
Yeah.
And so I think if you just stick to that, and at the end of the day, what I remind myself is not to let the opinions of other people bother me. That's why those comments, I let it just roll off. I really don't care because they don't know my parents' story.
That's right. And that's something to keep in mind, that people will make judgments about things that they're uncertain of, that they're scared of, that they think is weird. And it's our job, maybe, like I said, it's our wonderful responsibility to be like, okay, well, let me tell you a great story, and debunk these ideas that people have about mixed race families, or, you know, parents from different countries getting together because of some terrible reason or another. I think that it's cool that we can have these kind of stories, and people are always going to be curious about it, and how you portray it and how you share it, that's up to you. But I do believe that we can change it into a more positive narrative.
Yeah.
All right, so the very last one, and we'll just do this one really quick. People accuse me of being fake. I know, like, people saying, like, you're not Thai. Look at you. You have blonde hair.
Yeah.
So it's like, so why are you pretending you're Thai? This gets under my skin a little bit. Okay, just briefly on this one. I just want to say it is very easy to demonize and judge mixed race people because it's all right there in front of you. Because you don't have to get to know the person a little deeper. You don't have to understand their backgrounds to make judgments. You can just look at how they look. And that is the easiest way to judge any person, just by how they look. Don't judge a book by its cover, right? And so I think it is very common for mixed race people to get these kind of statements.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, you shouldn't care about that because you look mostly white.
Right.
That is just an outward appearance judgment.
Right.
And as painful as that might be, I think as long as you feel strong in yourself and knowing who you are and what actually makes up the person that you are, those kind of comments can just roll off.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I'll make one little point on a personal note. To that point, I have received comments from people that actually that love me and I love them, you know, just people that I know, friends or associates or whatever. They'll say things like, mainly for Korean people, they'll say things like, oh, and these are Korean Americans I'm referring to, actually. Yeah. They're like, oh, you actually, you know, you eat Korean food really well, or you, I know, take your pick. You speak Korean well or whatever. Your Korean pronunciation is good. And those are sort of the reverse of that point, I think, or it has a subtle way of saying that sixth point. Like, you're not that you're being fake, but, oh, this isn't really who you are, but you can actually, you know, do, I don't know if that makes sense, but you're capable of doing that. So it kind of makes me feel like, oh, am I a poser, or am I someone who is not, you know, Korean, but I'm able to do these things? Yeah. So in a way, that's those type of comments makes me feel that way.
Yeah. How do you deal with that then?
Well, in the past, I just kind of like, I never really corrected them or, you know, said, well, I am Korean. Now I have a tendency to do that. But before, I would just like let it roll off.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say anything.
I would just say, and we're going to wrap this up really, really fast, but I would just say in note of all of these 6 things that we talked about, for those who feel this very strongly, for those who struggle with how to respond to this, before all of that, I think the most important thing is to deal internally yourself. Really ask yourself, like, well, who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to portray myself as? Like, even if the world sees me in one way, does that really matter? Because is that really who I am? And people are going to judge based on my outward appearance no matter what. So I think if you start to ask those questions and you feel more stable in who you are yourself, then learning how to answer when these circumstances arise is not going to be as hard. It's not going to be like a one-off thing. It's just going to be like, well, I already know my core, so let me just explain that to you and we'll be on our merry way. Right. So none of this is to make you feel angry. None of this is to make you be like, I have a right to respond to you. The whole purpose of this episode was to say, we hear you, we understand. This is how you can put it into words. And what we, through our personal experiences and just our own study, what we think might be the best way to respond. Right. And by doing so, hopefully we as a whole and as a community can start sharing a more positive narrative about mixed race people. Any other things you'd like to point out?
No, I think we covered everything there. I mean, we could elaborate on, you know, everything, of course, but
honestly, we could list it to like 100, 200. Yeah. But we don't want to get nitpicky or petty. But yeah, we hope that you guys could empathize, sympathize, could relate, and also realize maybe things about yourself and things about how you want to address these questions when they come up in your life, as inevitably they will. So on that final note, I will say we'll have listener mail next week's episode, so make sure you guys tune in for that. We love getting listener mail from you guys, and you can always write in at thehalfieproject@gmail.com. We appreciate every bit of messages we get from you guys.
Totally.
Yes, and I guess that's it. So follow us on social media. You can listen to this podcast anywhere you get podcasts: iTunes, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher. We are everywhere. And like I said, get in touch with thehalfieproject@gmail.com. Follow us on social media, The Halfie Project, and we will see you guys next week. We are The Halfie Project.